Today I'm going to be showing you how to make Kinder Bueno chocolate muffins. They're super chocolatey, they're fudgy and moist, they've got hazelnut spread stuffed in the middle. They could not be any more perfect if we tried. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. If you didn't already know, I'm Sophia, the owner of Soph's Goodies, and welcome back to my cozy kitchen. So the first thing we're going to be doing is melting our butter in the microwave, because at the start we want to add all of our wet ingredients into the batter at once. With things like muffins, it's a lot easier to do all of the dry ingredients together and all of the wet ingredients together rather than doing like wet, dry, wet, dry. We're doing 55 grams of unsalted butter for these muffins. I wouldn't really recommend using salted butter for a recipe like this, just because you don't really want to get that salty taste for muffins like these. So I'm going to go melt this and I'll be back in a sec. Okay, so we're going to be left with our melted butter, which we're going to pour into a large mixing bowl. So once our butter is in the bowl, we're going to move on to adding our buttermilk. The really good thing about buttermilk is if you haven't got any, you can actually make it yourself with a really quick little hack. You basically just add 1 tablespoon of white wine vinegar into the bowl of milk, mix it together, let it sit for 5 minutes, and it will thicken, and it's perfect for muffins. It does smell a bit weird because of the vinegar, but that's absolutely fine because when you add it into the actual batter, you can't smell it anymore. So we're just going to pour that into our large mixing bowl with the butter. The next wet ingredient is eggs, and for this recipe, we're going to be using 2 medium eggs, which we're just going to crack into the bowl, and then we're going to start mixing the ingredients together with a hand balloon whisk. And the reason we don't use an electric whisk for these muffins is because we don't actually want to add too much air into the batter. We don't actually want them to be super airy and light and fluffy. For these chocolate muffins, we want them to be nice and fudgy, which comes along with not over whisking the batter. The good thing about muffins like these is they're super quick and easy. They're one bowl, which is great. That just then means you don't need to use as much equipment in your kitchen. And don't worry at this point if the mixture looks a bit weird, it might look a little bit curdled. That's absolutely fine, because when we add in our dry ingredients, that's what actually gets rid of any sort of like weird lumps and bumps, and it just fixes everything right up basically. And then the final wet ingredient that we add into our bowl is actually 60 ml of vegetable oil. Adding oil as well as milk and a little bit of butter is what's going to make these muffins super moist. Let's pour that in and then continue to whisk until it's been fully incorporated. So now it's time to start gradually adding in our dry ingredients, and we're going to start with our sugar. So today we've got 300 grams of caster sugar, and caster sugar alone, no brown sugar, but the caster sugar is going to help create really nice light muffins but also keep that moistness in there. We add that into the bowl and then give that a little mix. So once we've added in our caster sugar, we're going to go in with our plain flour. We're not using self-raising flour for this recipe because we're adding in baking powder. So we're going to pour in our plain flour, followed by 2.5 teaspoons of baking powder and 1/2 teaspoon of bicarbonate of soda. What the baking powder does is helps the muffins rise. We want that really nice raised top for these muffins, and the bicarbonate of soda helps give them that like classic crackly top. And then the secret ingredient for this recipe is we're going to add 1 teaspoon of instant coffee, which basically just helps keep the muffins super moist. And then the final dry ingredient is 75 grams of cocoa powder. So we're going to add those into the bowl. Oh, I think that literally went everywhere. You want to make sure you get all of it out of the bowl, because for some reason cocoa powder tends to like stick to bowls. Once we've got that in there too, we're going to start mixing with our hand mixer until any lumps have been completely dispersed. And you might be wondering, does adding coffee leave lumps in the batter when baked? Like, am I just going to bite into a little bit of coffee? Definitely not. It completely dissolves when baked, which is the great part of these muffins. You're not just going to get that weird like lump of coffee. It's just a little hack to get them nice and decadent and super indulgent. The batter itself is completely done now. It's looking so fudgy and good. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to try this later. If you really wanted to make these super indulgent and super Kinder Bueno-y, if that's a word, you could actually add a tablespoon of melted hazelnut spread into the batter and just stir that through. So now it's time to add chocolate chips into the batter. I have gone for 2 packets of milk chocolate chips. You could go for white chocolate chips, dark chocolate chips, a combination of milk and dark, or a combination of milk and white. It's really fun to get creative with the actual inclusions for this recipe. On that note, I'm just going to pour them into the batter. Then I'm just going to remove my hand mix from the bowl, and then with a spatula, I'm just going to fold all the chocolate chips through the batter, making sure they're evenly distributed. This just looks absolutely incredible. Once you try these, you're going to be addicted, honestly. They are divine. And the reason that we use a spatula at the end is just because once all the lumps are out, we don't want to whisk any more air into the batter. This just helps create that really fudgy texture that we're after. All of my chocolate chips are evenly dispersed. It's now time to get the batter into the cupcake cases, which we're going to make ourselves today. I'm going to give you my best baking hack hack for making homemade muffin cases. It does take a bit of time, but it's actually so good if like you're making cakes or something and you're like, oh my gosh, I've made everything. It's a Sunday, all the shops are shut and I haven't got any cupcake cases. You can make your own. So what we're gonna do first is grease the muffin tin, every single one. I don't really know what you would call these, like holes, I suppose, with margarine. It doesn't need to be completely soaked in margarine, but the reason we need to do this is so that the baking paper will stick down when we then go to add it shortly after. The way that we do this is we cut off some pieces of baking paper. You want to make squares ideally. Just keep trimming it until you get the right shape. We're going to cut out 4 little slits, one on each side of the square. You're going to place it just on top of the little dip in the mold. Get something small enough that's going to be able to push it down into the actual cupcake mold. I'm just using a salt shaker today. And then you just literally push it down and it will stick into the tin as so. If it's not perfect, you can just adjust it as you like, and then you keep going until you've done all 12. It does take a little bit of time, but it's completely worth it and a great little baking hack if you haven't got any cupcake cases. And just try and make all of the baking paper squares as evenly sized as possible, because you don't want them too small so you can't put enough muffin batter in there. You do really need a good amount of margarine to make sure they stick, otherwise they can sort of like start poking up again. There you have it, homemade muffin cases. Time for the fun part. We're going to take a cupcake scoop. You can also use a large spoon if you haven't got one of these. I think this is the 2 tablespoon one. And we're going to start scooping out our batter and adding it into our cupcake cases. And also making sure there's an even amount in each one, just so they look as aesthetically pleasing as possible when they come out of the oven and they all look the same size. And this recipe actually gives you a really large amount of batter, which is great because you can make really tall muffins. And if you even have any left, you can make a second round. That is how you actually get bakery style muffins. It's actually by putting in quite a lot of batter almost to the top so that when they rise you get that lovely shape. But obviously we don't want to do too much and then they start overflowing. We're going to bake these starting off at 200 degrees for a fan oven, so that would be 220 for a convection oven. Then after 5 minutes we bring the temperature down to 160 fan or 180 convection, and then we bake for an additional 10 to 15 minutes. Keep an eye on them because you don't want them to be overbaked, so I would start checking them from around 10 minutes and see how they get on. You'll know they're done when you put a skewer through the middle and it comes out completely clean. So I'll see you when they're baked. As soon as the muffins are out the oven, we're going to place them on a surface, grab a small serrated knife and just score a small hole in the top of each muffin, which is where we're going to add our hazelnut spread later. And then once you've done that, we're going to leave them to cool for about 15 minutes before grabbing our hazelnut spread. This can be from anywhere you like. I got mine from B&M Bargains in the UK, but honestly I think every single shop does a version of this now. We're going to add that to a piping bag, snip off a medium-sized tip for the piping bag, and then we're going to start gently pressing the piping bag into each muffin, pushing the spread out gently and then bringing it all the way to the top so you can see a little bit of spread right at the top, which is where we're going to stick our Kinder Buenos later. Repeat this process until all the muffins have got spread in the middle. Unwrap your Kinder Buenos and add them on top of each muffin. Let them cool until they're lukewarm because they're so good when they're still a little bit warm and gooey. And there you have it. That is how to make Kinder Bueno chocolate muffins. They are honestly incredible. They're thick, they're like brownie-like almost. They taste absolutely incredible. One of these with some vanilla ice cream just hit different. I am so happy with how these turned out today. And on that note, I hope you enjoyed coming along with me to see how we made these. Every week on my channel, I'm going to be posting a brand new recipe every Sunday, so stay tuned for that. And also please let me know in the comments what you'd like me to bake next. Give me as many suggestions as you can and I will work my way through all of them. If you did like this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel, and I will see you next week for a new video.